California's governor says he wants more men in teaching and mental health roles to help reduce the number of men from offing themselves. But the shortage isn't random, it certainly is not new, and it's been getting worse. My perspective here draws directly from rules of engagement, the same principles I teach for reclaiming authority and calibrating leadership in relationships, but here I'm applying the principles to how men navigate career pipelines and academic involvement. From grade schools to counseling offices, men are intentionally missing, and it's not because they don't care. These careers are dominated by women, shaped by cultural and institutional barriers that make men feel unwelcome long before they even enter a career field. Newsom's executive order does put a spotlight on that shortage, but it does not address the reasons that men avoid these professions in the first place. In the first part of this series, I'll briefly describe California's plan and then look into real data that expose the lack of men in teaching and therapy careers and why it's a problem that may not have a solution. Hey, I'm Todd. Thanks for stopping by. I'm an author and a researcher. I'm a psychologist who supports men, and I hope that my content earns your subscription. A few weeks ago, California Governor Gavin Newsom signed an order that he hopes will increase the number of men in teaching and mental health roles. In theory, it's framed as a way to reduce male suicide rates and give boys more positive outcomes. However, many people see this as little more than a directive for bureaucratic agencies to study the issue, with no new funding, no new programs, and absolutely without addressing the deeper cultural and institutional barriers that keep men out of those careers. In the United States, men represent only about 24% of therapists, and among psychologists under age 30, that drops to 5%. And no, I did not misstate that. You did not hear me incorrectly. It is literally 5%. Data from 2023 show that only 32.7% of clinical and counseling psychologists are men, with other reports placing it closer to 20. The decline began years ago, as while men are roughly 18% of social workers and 20% of psychologists today, those numbers have collapsed from 38% and 68% respectively since 1968. At the graduate level, only about 20% of psychology master's and above degree recipients are men, and for social work, the number is closer to 12%. So the imbalance is baked in years before men would even enter the workflow. Teaching professions follow a very similar pattern, with less than 25% of public school teachers in the US being male, compared to nearly 1 in 3 in the 1970s and 80s. And for those of you across the pond, in England, it's 1/3 of secondary school teachers, but just 1 in 7 in primary schools. Early childhood education roles are even more skewed, with male caregivers making up only a sliver of the workforce. I have no idea why Governor Newsom thinks he can fix this 50-year-old issue, because this absence of men in teaching and therapeutic roles has created a support deficiency with a multi-generational ripple effect. Combined with the nonstop rise of boys growing up in their mother-only homes since the 1970s, it means most boys in their formative years rarely see men in positions of guidance, care, or emotional leadership. Without consistent male mentorship, whether it's at the home, in the classroom, or in mental health offices, boys miss daily exposure to masculine authority and direction. In schools, that means fewer teachers who can read and respond to early signs of emotional struggle in boys. And in therapy, it means male clients often have no option but to work with somebody whose worldview and academic training is entirely different from their needs. The Newsom administration's order, it does acknowledge this shortage, but the approach is very shallow, I believe. Recruiting and training more male therapists sounds promising, but without changing the academic climate where masculine traits are frequently pathologized, and without creating a workplace culture in which male authority is respected, it's asking men to join systems that are not built for them. From a rules perspective, this is not just an issue of a headcount. It's more about ignoring the authority and decisiveness that men need to lead. They're being asked to step into roles without the autonomy to lead in their own way, and without the freedom to structure their approach without being second-guessed. And the result is twofold. The shortage limits male representation, while at the same time making it harder for men to seek help and to connect with someone that they trust. Think about this. Men who step into therapy are 4 times more likely to sit across from a female therapist whose training may be unintentionally working against male strengths. And when the interaction feels mismatched, or even worse, or maybe even more likely, it's dismissive or aggressive, it confirms the belief that these standard approaches are not for these men. That's when many men disengage and redirect their resources into male-only peer groups or alternative communities where they can speak freely without needing to translate their experience. Ultimately, my argument is that California's executive order is less about solving the shortage of men in teaching and therapy and more about political positioning. With the heat of midterm elections less than a year away, the Democratic Party is under pressure to re-engage groups in which it's lost support, and men, especially younger working-class men, have been drifting in droves toward disengagement. Newsom framing his order as a men's mental health initiative creates a headline that appears bipartisan and compassionate, while also serving as a quiet outreach to pull disenfranchised male voters back into the fold. For some people, it signals that the party is listening to men's concerns, even if the solutions offered are more about optics than actual structural change. So that's the reality of where men aren't. They're not in teachers' lounges, they're not in counseling offices, and they're sure as hell not applying for mental health degrees that claim that they want male presence but rarely create the conditions for it. But what do you think? Is this shortage an accident, or has the system been designed that way? Drop your thoughts below, and if you're into this kind of deep dive, please subscribe so that you don't miss parts 2 and 3 coming soon. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.